In 2018, one of Sony PlayStation's flagship franchises would awaken from a 5-year slumber as Sony Santa Monica released God of War 4, or as they would prefer to call it, God of War. Perfectly not confusing for newcomers in any way, I'm sure of it. For many, it could be seen as a vast improvement or expansion of the original series, as it not only moved our favorite anti-hero Kratos to a new land with new gods, it also, on a surface level at least, handled themes and ideas that were deemed as more mature and nuanced than anything in the first 3 games. Kratos was seen as a more layered, complex character than he'd ever been previously, and the tone overall was a vast departure from the installment that had come previously. Let's talk about all of that. Before I talk about anything regarding the narrative or the gameplay, I would like to address that last point I mentioned in the introduction regarding the character of Kratos and the tone of the game. Most reviewers, journalists, and critics who gave their thoughts on the game were quick to mention how Kratos had developed into a deep character with thoughts and emotions, and how they didn't seem to think that he could be that type of person, but it greatly enhanced the experience of playing the game. This is one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard someone who takes themselves seriously in game journalism ever say about any game. To imply that it took 8 entries for the character to display any form of emotion, when the very first thing that we ever saw him do in the first game was attempt to take his own life because he felt so empty inside, is utterly absurd. How about his initial motivation to make his deal with Ares in the first place? He didn't seek power for the sake of it, he needed to survive so that he could save his daughter Calliope. When the God of War took advantage of him and made him kill his family, his rage and bloodlust is entirely believable, understandable, and relatable as we identify with his want for revenge on the god who lied to him and ruined his life. What about the moment that he tried to redeem Pandora because she reminded him of his daughter? Or the moment while he was dead where he had to fight his brother Deimos, whom he hadn't seen in many years and didn't exactly want to do that? Or the fact that his appetite for vengeance led him to killing his own father and then nearly killing himself to be free of his curse and resulted in the end of Greece as a whole? I understand that on the surface, these games don't offer much in the way of character development and progression, but if you actually play them, and you pay attention, it's very easy to tell that Kratos has always been a creature of passion and emotion, and in this game in particular, his emotions are more subdued and buried than ever before, so if all we're doing is looking on the surface like so many people seem to for all the previous games, he's actually a less evolved character than he was before. Sorry about all of that. Anyway, I have a lot to say about the story of this game, so I'll save that for later, meaning it's time to talk about the gameplay this time around, and oh boy, this one's going to be controversial. I would like to break the gameplay into 3 sections, those being combat, exploration, and puzzle solving. I know it seems weird to give puzzle solving its own section, but it'll make sense when I get there, I promise. For now, let's focus on the combat, since that's what you spend most of your time in this game doing. The combat in this game is definitely what one would call a mixed bag. On one hand, it's more complicated and difficult than it had been in the past, but on the other hand, the difficulty feels more like a design oversight than a design choice. Let me explain. The main thing that creates the difference in this game's combat system is that it emulates a Soulsborne game and that the attack buttons are up on the right shoulder, and the game encourages you to strike a balance between offense and defense in order to succeed. This isn't inherently a bad thing, as I feel that a combat system like that can be really rewarding when designed well. Unfortunately, I don't think it was here. You see, in most games with this system, such as Demon's Souls, Dark Souls, Bloodborne, Nioh, Jedi Fallen Order, and so on, the camera gives you enough breathing room to assess the situation and determine exactly how to handle an enemy encounter, especially if you find yourself surrounded. However, in this game, the camera is parked right in your armpit as part of this game's commitment to a single camera shot for the entirety of its duration, which I'll admit is ambitious, but also gets in the way in certain situations. To compensate for the design flaw, Sony Santa Monica decided to include a proximity alert indicator at the bottom of the screen and a quick turn button so that you could identify incoming danger and react accordingly. I will say I find it interesting that implementing these 2 systems was an easier fix than just backing the camera up a little bit and letting you turn Kratos' massive body a little bit faster. On that note, maybe it's just me, but I rarely ever use the indicator or the quick turn because the danger icon changes color to tell you when you need to react, and looking at such a small thing on the screen for so long in the heat of the battle is just a little bit more of a distraction than it is really helpful, and the quick turn was strictly disorienting and never actually helped me out in any situation. Furthermore, this combat is actually very layered and in-depth, as there are 4 weapons in total, being the Leviathan Axe, the Blades of Chaos, the Guardian Shield, and Kratos' God-killing mitts, each with their own skill trees and abilities to unlock. going so far as to be able to use different super attacks called runic attacks that you gain from unlocking different runes. Figuring out how to chain one attack directly into another and factoring in cooldowns and stun animation is all very satisfying to learn, and even more so when you get it right. However, I began to notice that this isn't always consistent when I was going up against the toughest enemy type that this game has to offer, Valkyries. The worst thing in this game is when you're fighting the most difficult boss fights in the entire game and you utilize a combo that you've been doing since the latter half of the story, and it suddenly doesn't work anymore. And you can't figure out if there's something different with this enemy's hitbox, or if there's a different amount of hit stun, or what, and even after you finally beat it, you can't figure out what you did differently. Not to say that this is the experience everyone had, but there seems to be multiple elements of poor design or oversight that just consolidate into a not very fun experience fighting these enemies. Outside of these bits, I can't find the combat to be any more enjoyable than it is in the regular gameplay of the game, and I really liked it. So I don't take away too many points, especially when you obtain the blades and can switch back and forth between them and the axe in a single combo chain, and it's all just splendid. Next up for gameplay, I want to talk about exploration. I'm sorry, but this element of the game is absolutely abysmal, and in my opinion is only tolerable because of the dynamic between Kratos, Atreus, and eventually Lemire. However, if this game had been a soul journey, like Ghost of Tsushima, with no companion characters attached to your hip, literally, and the exploration still operated in the same way, I don't think I would have finished the game in all honesty. It's that boring. The exploration mostly consists of sitting on a boat, paddling your way through the Lake of Nine, and occasionally finding a place to park the boat where you will then walk around and maybe find a chest or a puzzle to solve, which I'll talk about later. Another sin in this aspect of the game is the traversal, which I don't think I've ever seen anyone speak highly of. In previous games, you had a jump button which you could use to perform precise jumps and solve platforming puzzles and otherwise maneuver around the environment. This game wants to be taken much more seriously though, so there is no jump button. Instead, you make very specific vertical or horizontal leaps when prompted to do so by the circle button popping up on the screen, and then you climb through very deliberately laid out cracks and grooves in the walls while Atreus magnetizes to your spine. And the most exhilarating thing that you do is hold up on the left analog stick. And this isn't the only game guilty of making you hold the stick upwards and disguising the events as interesting or exciting. Uncharted tends to do that, the Resident Evil 3 remake did that, but the difference with those is that they at least put something fascinating on the screen, like a giant zombie mutant chasing you, or a clock tower collapsing around you, something like that that you can work with. This game, though, it can't be bothered with such a thing most of the time, and it just exhibits the least interesting exploration and worst traversal through what I guess could be called obstacles in a game that I've seen all generation, and that's not something I'll take back or apologize for. Now, it may seem strange, I know, but I'd like to take a moment to discuss the puzzle solving in this game. This is another element of the game that I think utterly lacks in imagination in almost every way possible. You see, this game has a feature that makes Kratos operate much like you would expect Thor to, in that you can throw the Leviathan axe and then press triangle to recall it to your hand. This has many practical applications in the gameplay, though in most puzzle-solving situations, you just end up trying to figure out where to throw it and whether or not you need to recall it before you maybe make a jump or something like that. And occasionally you'll need Atreus to shoot something with an arrow. Combining that with the game's restrictive presentation style, and each puzzle feels less like a rewarding mystery for you to solve over the next few minutes, and more like a chore that you just gotta get past so that you can either advance to the next area or get closer to upgrading your max health or your Spartan rage or something like that. And I'm not exaggerating when I simplify the puzzles the way I did. Legitimately, you throw your axe at something and it either opens a path for you to follow, or breaks a jar with a rune on it, or freezes a pulley system so you can access an object or an area or something like that. The most complicated one was in regards to the death traps in Tyr's temple, where you have to get past the spinning blades to, get them all lined up so that you can progress. That one's, like, one good one in a 20-hour game. Like, come on. I'm not even saying that the game has to be like Uncharted or the recent Tomb Raider trilogy or Resident Evil 2 or even Doom Eternal, but if you're gonna stick so many puzzles in my face, at least have them be interesting and unique from one another. I'm not always thinking with portals or anything like that, but I would like to at least be challenged. Are you still here? If so, congratulations. I think you personally might deserve a reward. Or you could reward me and hit one of the buttons below the video. Any of them do, except for the dislike. That one's no good. But like, subscribe, join, my personal shop, comment, all of those are absolutely brilliant. And they all do cool things when you click on them, I promise. For instance, YouTube might realize that you like my video, so they'll pop up in other people's recommended feed even more. That's pretty cool, right? It's up to you, but I would like it if you did. Earlier, I mentioned that certain enemies could only be defeated using the proper weapon, and said that I believe that to be indicative of poor design when it comes to enemies. This next point, I don't really have anywhere to put it, so I'm going to stick it right before my analysis of the story. This game is downright lazy, lethargic with enemy design. I'm not bothered by the fact that all the Valkyries look damn near the same, or that every Draugr is pulled from a pool of like 3 different designs, but I'll tell you what does bother me. This fucking troll with a rock. You know what else? This goddamn ancient. You fight this same enemy with a different color combination about 9 times each. They account for literally over 90% of the mandatory boss encounters in the story of this game. I did the math. After the first one, it's never fun or interesting again, and I am beyond disappointed at the lack of effort on display here, especially when you have to go to Helheim in order to save Atreus. That entire chunk of the story alludes to this mighty, formidable gatekeeper in that realm that you'll have to face, so I was expecting something interesting. But I was met with a troll carrying a rock. And then there's a cutscene with a giant raven in the background when Kratos sees Zeus' spirit in hell, which the implications of a Greek god being in Nordic hell, there's just a lot of things to unpack there, and we'll get there when we get there. But you had the perfect opportunity to give me something new, something unique to fight. And I got a troll with a rock. Alright, ladies, gentlemen, and Draugr, we've come to the bit that's really gonna get me cancelled. Now it is time to talk about the story of this game. This time, we're focused on Joel as he has to relearn what it's like to be a parent, as he has to escort Ellie to... Huh? That's The Last of Us? Wait, no. No. The grizzled dad with a beard whose daughter died, and then he, decades later, has a new kid, and they go on a journey. And the camera is like stuck in your back, right behind your neck, and the arc is about learning how to love this kid, and you form a strong bond and stuff like that. You mean to tell me it's a different game? Oh shit, my bad. So this game is set an ambiguous amount of time after God of War 3, maybe 150 years, not entirely sure, and Kratos has somehow ended up in a new land with new gods. And I'm not saying that to be reductive. There's literally no explanation as to how he got from Greece to Norway, or Sweden, or Finland, and how just taking a boat to somewhere else gave him new gods to deal with. It's the most perplexing thing about the entire story, and you could try to hand-wave it away as not being important, but the implications are massive. That means, in theory, he could go to Japan and fight Amaterasu, or Egypt and fight Ra, or Ireland and fight Dagda. I hope I said all of those right. Or maybe not, because apparently there was a god named Tyr who visited these other pantheons and he needed something called a Unity Stone to do it, but Kratos doesn't seem to know what that is, so he clearly didn't have one, and I just want something to tell me what the hell any of this means. Now, when I break it all down like that, it doesn't seem so bad. It actually seems rather straightforward. However, in practice, this story gets stretched out from what should be like a 7 or 8 hour romp through the realms into more like an 18 to 20 hour commitment of your life. Well, golly, Tuxie Boyo. How'd they get another, 12 hours of content? I'll tell you, the game suffers from a disorder that I like to call sidetrack syndrome. Now, this is something that is hardly new in the video game industry, but it really made itself known to me in Batman Arkham Knight. And what it is essentially you have a starting point, A, and an ending point, B. And ideally, you would just make your way straight to the ending point, encountering increasingly more difficult puzzles, enemies, and challenges as the story progresses. However, in this game, it's not that simple. There are detours, dead ends, off-ramps, on-ramps, overpasses, broken bridges, and cul-de-sacs standing in between you and your goal. To make an example of my point, Kratos wants to make sure Atreus knows how to hunt and fight before they start the journey. So he has him track and shoot a boar that just so happens to belong to a tree witch. So the plot derails so that you can visit her and she can give you some expo. And then you try to go up the mountain, but there's some darkness in the way. So the plot derails and so that you can go to another realm and get some light. But of course that entails being introduced to the realm travel room and the concept of going from one realm to another, which in itself is another derailment from what you were doing just moments prior. After all that, you get past the darkness and meet a god who knows everything, and he's the one that tells you that you're in the wrong realm for your objective, and you need to decapitate him and bring him back to the Tree Witch to revive him. Later on, you need to get into a vault, but you need a special material that can only be found at the tip of a dead giant's chisel, so you have to go find that. Later still, you're progressing through the plot, and Atreus accidentally awakens his Spartan rage, which makes him fall into a coma, so you have to take him back to who you now know as Freya, a Vanir goddess, and she tells you to go to Helheim to get something to heal him. And then you get the rune to go to Jotunheim, and Atreus starts acting like a little bitch baby, and you end up falling into Helheim a second time, and needing to escape before you can progress. Are you seeing the pattern? Imagine you want to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but your peanut butter is in a locked chest, and you don't have the key, so you go get a lockpick, but the lockpick is in a container with the combination lock on it, so you have to go to Walmart and talk to the electronics cashier to get the combination, but he's being held captive at Target, so you gotta go to Target, but to get in there you need a pair of bolt cutters from Home Depot, but the Home Depot is closed, so you gotta sneak in through the window. And then there's also jelly to consider. Stuff like that becomes very apparent after it happens with every single thing you try to do for over a dozen hours, and once you notice it, you start to feel every minute of gameplay standing between you and the credit sequence, and I hated it. I've mentioned earlier that Kratos has a new child in this game, which the implications of are huge. However, they never really make any mention that I can remember of the fact that he had a previous family, so if this is someone's first God of War game, which is very likely considering it's the best-selling title of the series, then there's so much that you have no idea about. Why does Kratos have bandages around his arms? Why is his skin bone white? Who's that spirit that talks to him when he retrieves the Blades of Chaos? What the hell are the Blades of Chaos? Why is he called the Ghost of Sparta? And so forth. But even if you're a veteran of the franchise like I am, there's still questions. Where did these new gods come from? How did Kratos survive what he did at the end of God of War 3? How did he get rid of the Blades of Athena / Blades of Exile? And where did he get the Blades of Chaos back from? Why does it look like the ashes are starting to maybe fade from his skin? Is the curse wearing off? I'm sure you can imagine that we never get answers to any of these things. I don't care about the fact that there's going to be a sequel, since this is a multiple dozen-hour experience and that this is the game that introduces all these concepts. The least they could do is explain them in some sort of meaningful way, but no. And I'm not going to lie, it gets really old after a while. I got tired of wondering things and knowing that I would never get the answer. Now let's spend a bit focusing strictly on Atreus. The theme of this game, at least as I saw it, is the cycle of lies and manipulation and abuse breeding hatred, avarice, and more hatred from the offspring of gods towards their parents. This is exemplified in Atreus, Kratos, Zeus, Balder, Magni, Modi, Thor, and Freya, in different ways for each character. It's actually a very beautiful message about how the cycle has to be broken somewhere, and it's up to each individual to make the decision to end it. It really resonated with me. But what didn't resonate was the shortcuts that Kratos and Atreus' relationship takes from broken to healed over the course of one conversation. This is the exact same problem that I had in The Last of Us, but there all the development happened off-screen during the time skips. Here, it just doesn't happen. At the beginning of the game, it's very easy to see that Kratos clearly loves and cares for his son, but his own upbringing, environment, and most importantly, relationship with his father all hinder him in his ability to properly provide the emotional aspect of a healthy childhood. This was the setup for something beautiful, as Kratos struggles to properly communicate with him and find a balance between mentor and father, and this is negatively impacting Atreus on a very deep level. One of the best moments that shows this is when Kratos steps into a light beam and takes a trip to some dream sequence for a few moments and has visions of Atreus resenting his father, thinking even that he hates him for some reason. When he returns, it's revealed that Atreus has actually had to defend himself for hours with nothing but an axe that he can barely swing, and he takes this moment to voice his frustration towards him. And then in the gameplay moments after this, when you need his help with something, he actually questions whether or not you actually care or need him. And it's nice. I like it. Now, up to this point, you can tell that Kratos has left the truth of his godhood a secret, and when we find out that Freya herself is a god, she tells Kratos that he should be honest with his son before his true nature surfaces and causes him harm, alluding to the sickness that he's been having off and on since before the actual events of the game. What I don't quite understand is how not knowing the truth would affect him physically. It's like coming down with mesothelioma because you didn't know your father was a rock musician and he hooked up with your mother after a concert or something like that. I just don't understand. Now earlier, I mentioned that he falls critically ill after awakening his Spartan rage. After you have him cured, Kratos decides to tell him the truth about his heritage to Atreus, and from that point, he seems to be completely physically healthy, and I don't get it. I don't get what that's supposed to mean. What I do get is that his ego swells like a broken foot, and over the course of the next few hours, he gets entirely too big for his boots, talking down to Brock and Sindri, the lovely dwarves who upgrade your weapons and equipment over the course of the game, killing one of the sons of Thor as an act of dominance, and even disobeying your commands in regular gameplay, which is a very nice touch. This all comes to a head when, like I mentioned earlier, you finally have a chance to get to Jotunheim and bring an end to this whole affair, and Atreus decides to be so rebellious as to shoot Kratos with an arrow, leading to a chain of events that takes you back to Helheim. After this, Kratos gives him a stern talking to, and everything is fine. Literally everything. Their relationship, the gameplay dynamics, and his attitude are just all back to 100%, and there's no more development that happens in that aspect thereafter. I don't get it. Perhaps the most frustrating thing that this game does is that it spends about half its runtime telling you that because of your actions, the full force of Asgard is on its way to you, and you angered Thor, and more importantly, Odin, by effectively waging war on their family. You battle Thor's brother Baldur multiple times throughout the story and eventually kill him, summoning the eventual wrath of his mother Freya in the next game, I guess. You and Atreus kill both of Thor's sons, and Odin is watching your journey over the entire course of the game. And this all amounts to a post-credit scene that takes place at the end of Fimbulwinter, 3 years after the events of the game. I guess the Allfather was really upset about his family being killed off. Don't give me that shit about there needing to be sequels. Either deliver on the promise that you've been making for the last dozen hours, or don't make that promise at all. Imagine you were playing Marvel Spider-Man and there were hours upon hours of plot beats and moments leading to your eventual clash with Dr. Octavius as Dr. Octopus, and you just never end up fighting him in the game. Or in Devil May Cry 5, where the final 25% of the game leads to this climactic final showdown with Virgil to settle the rivalry, and he just never shows up again in the game to have that battle. You could try to compare it to the MCU or something, but if Loki spent the second half of the first Avengers movie telling you that Thanos was definitely coming and he's on his way, telling every single one of them about who he is, and then you just don't see him again for 2 more movies, translating to 6 years, that would have been a massive slap in the face of the audience. In the first God of War, it's very clear that your beef is with Ares, and what do you do at the end of that game? You kill Ares. Then you set your sights on Zeus after learning the truth, and you actually confront him in that game, leading to him killing you, and then that whole thing ends up with an assault on Mount Olympus, which is where the third game picks up, and you eventually have a rematch with Zeus and kill him. We could have had something similar to that, at least have me encounter Thor in the main story, but no. No, the story ends exactly the way that we knew it was going to the entire time. They stand at the top of the highest peak in the realms and spread phase ashes once Kratos stops calling him boy and switches to son. It leaves such a massive itch to be scratched. It may work for some of you, but definitely not for me. Especially since Vanaheim, Svartalfheim, and Asgard go completely unexplored, and Niflheim and Muspelheim are literally just challenge worlds. It's there for is loot and challenges. 2 entire realms reduced to nothing but trials. Now let's talk about Tyr. The game introduces a subplot centering around a god named Tyr who, as I said before, traveled to many distant lands collecting knowledge and encountering gods of all kinds, including Egyptian, Celtic, Greek, and Shinto. He kept all of his findings in a temple that you spend a good amount of time exploring, and you end up learning that Tyr was good friends with the giants and even put realm travel crystals in Mimir's head as his eyes, with the help of the giants, I believe. After that, you find out that Odin didn't trust Mimir for multiple reasons, including that one, and fed one of his eyes to Jormungandr, the world serpent, in a matter of ways, and cursed his body to be trapped in tree root. Why not, hide both of his eyes in different realms, you know? Put one in Vanaheim and the other one in Svartalfheim, something like that. It's just convenient that not only can you use his face to open a portal to Jotunheim when you get everything that you need, but that you're friends with the serpent who swallowed his other eye in the first place. It's a nitpick, I'll admit, but it's strange and it's noticeable. Anyway, so Tyr had knowledge of the other gods, including Kratos, as he had a vase that depicted him in his Ghost of Sparta days. So if he knew about Kratos and his mission, then does that mean he was aware of Zeus? I imagine it would be hard not to learn about the king of the gods when you're studying his son. And did all of this go unnoticed by Zeus? Because I'm sure that if Zeus knew there were other gods, he would have sought war, and conflict, and conquest, especially with his depiction in the series. And don't even get me started on Odin. There's also the implication that there's a group of gods for every certain region that practices one religion, right? So Are they all disconnected? Because Kratos basically caused the apocalypse in the third game by killing all the gods. So did that only affect Greece? I have a feeling that moving forward, the franchise will have no interest in answering this type of question. Then we have the Unity Stone again. Mimir tells you that Tyr's travels were made possible with an artifact called the Unity Stone that allowed him to move not only between realms, but to other countries, I guess. And Kratos learns what this is at around the same time that we do. So how the hell did he get there, get to where he is, without one? I just, like, bro, what? Am I stupid? I might be. Tell me in the comments if I'm the stupid. Lastly, let's address the reveals from the end of the game. You find out that the reason Asgard was hunting you was that they believed you were the last living giant, whom the Aesir guys despised for reasons that I can't quite remember, and they hunted to extinction with the exception of Faye. So now, the last living giant is her son, Atreus. And apparently the giants have future vision. I don't know if that's something from actual Nordic lore, but they have it in this game, and they can see years into the future. And Faye spoke with her people of the journey that you would have before they were all killed off, which I don't really remember what the point of that is. And apparently she laid out your entire path by painting things for you to climb on way before you embarked, which is interesting because you literally could not get to certain places that you went to until the time that you got to them in the story. So it's interesting, I guess, but whatever. But she also called Atreus Loki when discussing him, which I don't even want to think about what that means. The most interesting thing is that there is a supposed prophecy in which Atreus either witnesses or causes Kratos' death at some point down the line. So I guess we'll have to see what comes of that. It's all actually very interesting. Now, I don't want it to seem like there's nothing I liked about this story. There's plenty. I loved everything with Brock and Sindri, especially when they reunite and start working together again. I loved everything with Jormungandr. I loved Freya, and I thought Baldur was a fantastic central antagonist with a justifiable motivation and a longing for pain and even death. Even Magni and Modi were pretty cool, and wouldn't you know it, Nolan North and Troy Baker actually acted in this game. And I loved the boss fight against the dragon, especially when Atreus asks if he can kill something that big. I'm sure veterans of the franchise will remember Kronos. But in all, there's plenty to enjoy in this game, even if there's more that you dislike. Especially considering that I think this might be the second best looking game on PS4 behind maybe Ghost of Tsushima. And the soundtrack is damn near unmatched outside of Japanese games. Don't even get me started on the acting in this game. Oh. Now, Terrence Carson was absolutely perfect for the rage-driven, vengeance-seeking version of Kratos from the previous games. But the subdued, reserved performance we get from Christopher Judge in this game is tailored immaculately to the version of him we have now. Overall, I'm not going to question your gamer cred or intelligence if you like this game, or if it's your favorite PS4 title, or even your favorite game in the whole franchise, or your favorite game of all time, because I absolutely see the appeal. My goal is to never try and dissuade your opinion. I just want you guys to understand mine. Anyway, that's all I got for you guys this time, so I'll see you soon.